Hello everyone, and welcome back to Student Economist, where choosing to spend your time here is infinitely better than the opportunity cost. So for this question, I find that it's giving a bit of trouble in regards to what we believe is the answer. So before, I would have said the answer is D, but due to a bit of enlightenment, I've actually changed my answer to A, and I'm going to show why by simply just giving a detailed explanation as to why the answer would be A. So let's read the question again by quickly. We'd say a trade union successfully bargains for a wage increase in an imperfectly competitive labor market. What is the most likely consequence of this action in that labor market? So let's quickly realize what we did before in the perfectly competitive market. So remember, in the perfectly competitive market before, we actually had just simply worked with the equilibrium of the supply for labor and the demand for labor. So we'd end up just simply getting our equilibrium quantity for labor right there, and our wage rate right here, right? But now, remember, the operative word in this statement is actually that there's an imperfectly competitive labor market. So, in an imperfectly competitive labor market, we must note that both the employer and the employee actually have the ability to manipulate the wage rate. So, what we're talking about is essentially trade unions for the employee and the monopsonists for the employer, right? So, it's going to have a slight difference in comparison to the perfect. So, as I said before, it's going to be slightly different from what we would do for the perfectly competitive labor market, in the sense that now we're going to look at both the role of the monopsonist as well as the role of the trade union in wage determination. So, with the monopsonists, you do have to understand that they face what we call a steeper marginal cost for labor. And that really is due to the fact that they're the only supplier of labor. So they essentially have to increase their wages with every additional laborer that they employ. This is where we get statement that MLC must be equal to MRP, right? So now right here, we would have essentially established a new equilibrium where we say MCL is equal to MRP. This is essentially the profit maximizing point for the monopsonists. So they want this amount of labor, right? And they would maximize at that point. And essentially you would think that they would want to charge this wage, but remember, the monopsonist is the only buyer of labor in the market. So they do possess some amount of power to actually not charge this wage right here, but actually go all the way down here on the supply curve and actually charge this. So you can imagine the upset that this would cause with the workers, because they're charging a very low wage, right? But it must be noted that what's going to happen now is that the trade union is actually going to step in, and in this question it says that they successfully bargained for a wage increase, right? So, but remember, they have to do it in a certain way where it fits within this constraint, the lowest wage that the monopsonist is willing and able to give out, and it fits between the profit maximizing objective of the monopsonist. So essentially, if they charge too much, they would actually the monopsonist would actually not be operating profitably. So it must be noted that whatever the trade unions are gonna do, they have to do it between W and W1, right? So now this line right here would represent what the
trade unionists would actually get, the wage rate that they would actually get, somewhere in between the profit maximizing point, which is MRP equal MCL, and the actual lowest point that they're willing and able to actually pay. So this would be the wage that they would actually be paid after the successful collective bargaining, and additionally this amount of labor. So now we'd be moving from Q to Q1. This is where we actually receive the increase in the level of employment while also achieving an increase in wages. So that is really and truly why the answer would be A and not D. Before, we were actually using the perfectly competitive market, but now the question asks for the imperfectly competitive market, where you have to account for the monopsonists and also the trade union. I do hope that you have learned something from this. Please remember that the price to learn is zero, so raise your demand for excellence. You will do well today, guys.